When search crews found the weathered hiking boot buried in a remote Colorado creek bed, they expected to find nothing more than another piece of trail debris. But hidden inside the boot, wrapped in waterproof plastic, was an SD card containing 47 video files. The footage revealed that 26-year-old Rachel Madison hadn't died in a hiking accident as everyone believed. She had been stalked, captured, and murdered by a serial killer who had been hunting solo female hikers across multiple states for over a decade. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this powerful story of courage, survival, and a discovery that exposed a terrifying predator, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. Now, let's uncover the shocking truth behind a disappearance that revealed one of America's most dangerous serial killers. Rachel Madison was everything a predator looked for in a victim. She was young, attractive, physically fit, and most importantly, she hiked alone. The 24-year-old Colorado State University graduate student had a passion for the outdoors that her friends often worried was reckless. She would disappear for days at a time, hiking remote sections of the Continental Divide Trail with only her German Shepherd, Max, for company. On New Year's Day 2018, Rachel loaded her backpack and drove to Eagle Peak in Colorado's Pike National Forest. She planned a solo day hike on the Continental Divide Trail, a routine adventure she had done dozens of times before. She sent a text to her friend at 11:30 a.m. "Perfect weather up here. Max is loving the snow. See you tonight. Rachel never came home." When Rachel failed to return that evening, her friends contacted the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The search began immediately, focusing on the Eagle Peak area where her car was found in the trailhead parking lot. Her German Shepherd, Max, was found tied to a tree near the trail, agitated and barking frantically. The discovery of Max was the first sign that something was wrong. Rachel never would have left her dog behind voluntarily. The animal was dehydrated and exhausted, as if he had been tied there for hours. Search teams combed the mountain for 4 days, using helicopters, ground crews, and cadaver dogs. They found no trace of Rachel beyond her abandoned car and her traumatized dog. The official theory was that she had fallen from one of the mountain's many cliff faces, her body lost in the dense forest below. But one detective wasn't satisfied with that explanation. Colorado Bureau of Investigation Special Agent David Crenshaw had worked missing persons cases for 15 years, and something about Rachel's disappearance felt wrong. Experienced hikers don't just vanish, especially with their dogs left behind. Agent Crenshaw began investigating recent missing persons reports from other states. What he found was terrifying. Over the past 8 years, at least 6 young women had vanished while hiking alone in remote areas across the western United States. All were in their 20s, all were experienced hikers, and all had simply disappeared without a trace. The pattern was consistent: attractive young women hiking alone in remote locations far from help. Their cars were found in trailhead parking lots, their personal belongings undisturbed. None of their bodies had ever been recovered. Crenshaw suspected they were dealing with a serial killer who specifically targeted solo female hikers. The killer was organized, patient, and knew how to hunt in the wilderness without leaving evidence. He was also smart enough to operate across multiple state lines to avoid detection. But Crenshaw needed proof. He needed to find a connection between the disappearances, something that would give him a suspect. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On January 4, 2018, 3 days after Rachel disappeared, a hiker named Thomas Rodriguez was attacked near Eagle Peak by a man wielding a knife. Rodriguez managed to fight off his attacker and get a good look at his face before the man fled into the woods. Rodriguez's description led to a composite sketch. A white male in his 60s, gray hair, medium build, wearing outdoor gear. The sketch was circulated to law enforcement agencies across the region. Within hours, the sketch was identified. The man was Kenneth Slate, a 61-year-old drifter with a history of petty crimes and an obsession with hiking and camping in remote wilderness areas. Slate lived out of his van, moving from campground to campground with no permanent address. More importantly, Slate's van had been spotted at several of the trailheads where young women had disappeared over the past 8 years. The connection Agent Crenshaw had been looking for was finally emerging. On January 5th, Colorado State Police located Slate's van at a campground near Silverton, about 30 miles from Eagle Peak. When they approached to question him, Slate became agitated and attempted to flee. He was taken into custody without incident. A search of Slate's van revealed a horrifying collection of evidence. Police found camping gear, knives, zip ties, duct tape, and rope, classic tools of abduction. But most disturbing was what they found hidden under the van's floor: a collection of driver's licenses, credit cards, and personal items belonging to 6 different young women, including Rachel Madison. Among Rachel's belongings was her hiking boot, the one that search teams would later find in the creek bed. But when police found it in Slate's van, they discovered something searchers had missed. Hidden inside the boot, wrapped in multiple layers of waterproof plastic, was a small SD card. When investigators plugged the SD card into their computer, they found 47 video files, a horrifying record of Rachel's final days. The videos had been filmed by Rachel herself, using a small camera she carried for documenting her hikes. But instead of scenic mountain views, the footage showed her desperate struggle to survive after being captured by Kenneth Slate. The first video was filmed on January 2nd, the day after Rachel disappeared. It showed her in what appeared to be a small camp in the woods, her hands bound behind her back, her face bruised and swollen. "If anyone finds this," Rachel said to the camera, her voice steady despite her obvious terror, "My name is Rachel Madison. I was hiking on Eagle Peak when a man attacked me. He said his name is Kenneth. He's holding me somewhere in the mountains." The video revealed that Slate had approached Rachel on the trail, claiming to be lost and asking for directions. When she stopped to help him, he had attacked her with a knife, forced her to walk deeper into the woods, and taken her to a remote campsite he had prepared in advance. The subsequent videos chronicled 4 days of psychological and physical torture. Slate had kept Rachel alive for days, taunting her, threatening her, and filming her distress. But the videos also revealed Rachel's incredible courage and intelligence. Despite being bound and terrorized, Rachel had managed to secretly activate her camera and document everything Slate said and did. She had hidden the SD card in her boot, hoping that someday it would be found and her killer would be brought to justice. In one video, filmed on January 3rd, Rachel spoke directly to the camera while Slate was away from the campsite. "He's told me about other women he's killed," she said, her voice breaking. "He says he's been doing this for years." He described details about women in Utah, Nevada, Arizona. He's a serial killer. Rachel had essentially conducted her own investigation while being held captive, gathering intelligence about Slate's other crimes and recording it for law enforcement to find. The videos also revealed the horrifying details of how Slate operated. He would spend weeks scouting hiking trails, looking for women who matched his preferred victim type, young, fit, hiking alone. He would approach them on the trail, claiming to be lost or in need of help, exploiting their natural compassion to get close enough to attack. Once he had captured a victim, Slate would take them to predetermined campsites deep in the wilderness, far from any trail where other hikers might stumble across them. He would keep them alive for days, torturing them both physically and psychologically before eventually killing them. The videos showed that Slate had brought Rachel food and water, not out of kindness, but to prolong her suffering. He enjoyed having complete power over another human being, and he wanted to extend that experience as long as possible. But Rachel refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her completely broken. Even as she documented her own torture, she maintained a strength and dignity that clearly frustrated her captor. The final video was filmed on January 5th, the same day Slate was arrested. By this point, Rachel was barely recognizable. She had been beaten, starved, and terrorized for 4 days, but she still managed to speak to the camera. "I don't think I'm going to make it out of here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But if someone finds this, please tell my family that I fought. I never stopped fighting, and please make sure this monster never hurts anyone else." The video ended there. Later testimony revealed that Slate had killed Rachel shortly after filming that final message, apparently deciding that she had served her purpose and was becoming too much trouble to keep alive. But Rachel's courage in documenting her own captivity had given investigators everything they needed to not only convict her killer, but to connect him to a string of similar murders across multiple states. The SD card evidence was devastating. Kenneth Slate was charged with Rachel Madison's murder, and the video testimony she had essentially given from beyond the grave was the key evidence in his conviction. But the investigation was far from over. Using the information Rachel had gathered about Slate's other crimes, investigators began connecting him to the disappearances of at least 5 other women across the western United States. The pattern was always the same: young women hiking alone, approached by a friendly older man who claimed to need help, then taken to remote campsites where they were tortured and killed. Slate had been perfecting his technique for over a decade, becoming increasingly sophisticated in his methods. What made Slate particularly dangerous was his knowledge of wilderness areas. He had spent his entire adult life living outdoors, moving from campground to campground, learning the most remote and inaccessible areas where he could operate without detection. During his interrogation, Slate eventually confessed to killing Rachel Madison and provided details about the location of her remains. He led investigators to a remote area in the Pike National Forest where he had buried her body, but he refused to cooperate regarding his other victims. Even when faced with the evidence from Rachel's videos describing other murders, Slate claimed he couldn't remember details about other crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Rachel's murder. The investigation into Slate's other victims continues to this day. Using the intelligence Rachel gathered during her captivity, investigators have connected him to at least 6 other disappearances, though they suspect the actual number of victims may be much higher. The cases of Jennifer Phillips in Utah, Sarah Carson in Nevada, and Maria Santos in Arizona all bear Slate's signature pattern of targeting hikers in remote wilderness areas. Rachel's family established the Rachel Madison Memorial Foundation, which provides safety training and emergency equipment to solo hikers. The foundation has distributed thousands of GPS beacons, personal alarms, and emergency communication devices to hikers across the country. The foundation also works to educate hikers about the warning signs of predatory behavior and the importance of trusting their instincts when approached by strangers on the trail. Rachel's story became a case study in criminal justice programs, not only as an example of a serial killer's methods, but as an extraordinary example of a victim who refused to be silenced. Even while facing certain death, she found a way to ensure her killer would be caught. Special Agent David Crenshaw, who led the investigation, called Rachel's actions the most courageous thing I've ever witnessed in 30 years of law enforcement. She essentially solved her own murder and prevented other women from suffering the same fate. The hiking boot containing Rachel's SD card became crucial evidence in multiple trials. The videos she recorded not only convicted Kenneth Slate of her murder, but provided investigators with the information needed to connect him to crimes across multiple states. Today, hikers on the Continental Divide Trail near Eagle Peak can visit a memorial dedicated to Rachel Madison. It reads, "In memory of Rachel Madison, whose courage in the face of evil protected others from harm." Her voice could not be silenced. The memorial serves as both a tribute to Rachel's bravery and a reminder to hikers about the importance of safety precautions when venturing into remote wilderness areas. Rachel's case led to significant changes in how law enforcement agencies share information about missing hikers across state lines, helping to identify patterns of predatory behavior more quickly. Kenneth Slate remains in prison, serving multiple life sentences. Now, in his 70s, he has never expressed remorse for his crimes or provided information about additional victims. But investigators continue to work on cold cases involving missing hikers, using the behavioral profile and methods revealed by Rachel's videos to identify other potential victims. The SD card hidden in Rachel's hiking boot contained more than just evidence of her own murder. It provided a roadmap to understanding how a serial killer had operated undetected for over a decade, targeting some of society's most vulnerable people in the places where they felt safest. Rachel Madison went hiking alone on New Year's Day 2018, seeking the peace and solitude she found in the mountains. Instead, she encountered a monster who had been stalking women like her for years. But even in her final days, facing unimaginable terror, she found a way to fight back. Her hidden camera became her weapon, her testimony became her revenge, and her courage became her legacy. The mountains couldn't protect Rachel from Kenneth Slate, but her refusal to be silenced protected countless other women from suffering the same fate. In her own words, recorded in those final desperate days, "I never stopped fighting." And because she never stopped fighting, a serial killer's reign of terror came to an end. This video is a dramatized story inspired by real events. Names and certain details have been changed for creative purposes.